Certain places in the world seem to produce an unusually high number of centenarians. These are people living to age 100 or over. And what's remarkable is that these people are often still vibrant and active and in pretty good health into their 80s, 90s, and even 100s. They're not stuck in a nursing home or too sick to move. And these special geographies are called blue zones. Can we uncover the secrets hidden in plain sight that led to these people in these blue zones living to age 100 and enjoying great health? And is it possible to apply these lessons and create new blue zones so that we can improve the health of regular people like you and me? That's what the Netflix film Live to 100: Secrets of the Blue Zones explores. I'm going to review and summarise this intriguing film for you today. Let's go, friend. Hi, I'm Dr. Ryan Williams, your host and the founder of Growing Pure, where I help you make vegan cooking and health fast, simple, and mind-blowingly tasty. Now, in today's review, I am going to be talking about spoilers. I'm not sure if you can really spoil a documentary, but I'll be going into it in some detail. So if you don't want that, then go watch the series on Netflix first and then come back here. So what is the problem when it comes to health? Well, the film states in quite simple terms that most of what we think we understand about health and longevity is often misguided or just plain wrong. And it's not like we don't care about this stuff, right? We spend millions of dollars every year on gym memberships, supplements, diet plans. So we want to be healthy if we can. But unfortunately, the outlook looks pretty bleak where health is concerned. Worldwide, around about 2/3 of the 8 billion people on the planet are likely to die before their time from an avoidable disease. And for the first time in a century, lifespan is dropping in the US. So this series investigates what the blue zones can teach us about stopping and reversing this trend of poor health. And what's really curious is that though these places seem quite disparate and different on the surface, there are actually common denominators across all of them. So Live to 100 is a short series. It's just 4 episodes, each one about 30 minutes in length. And it follows Dan Buettner around these blue zones as he explores them, he talks to people, and he tries to investigate what leads to their longevity. Buettner is an explorer and he was sort of an athlete in his former life, but he spent the last 20 years investigating blue zones and how they create such a high number of centenarians. And I've got to say, the storytelling in the series is really powerful. It's very, very beautiful. It's really powerful to see real people and see how they live their lives. We meet characters like Ramiro, a Costa Rican sort of rancher who at age 100 is still riding his horse and chasing cattle around. Or Umeto, an Okinawan lady from Japan who at age 101 is still singing and playing a musical instrument and laughing with her family. And actually seeing these people go about their daily lives is really poignant. I think it's worth watching the series just for that. And what's incredible about the blue zones is that in these places, people suffer much lower rates of heart disease, dementia, and diabetes than you would typically expect, and certainly than we experience in most Western countries. And so generally the health they enjoy is much, much better than people in the US or the UK or Western Europe are likely to experience, in spite of spending much, much less on healthcare, which is quite staggering. So the visuals in this film are very rich, they're very colourful and beautiful. It's really easy to watch. And it sort of blends science and studies with storytelling in this really appealing, wonderful way. So what were the threads that tie all of these blue zones together, that explains their longevity? Well, Buettner has uncovered 4 key sort of pillars that they all share. So what are these core pillars of health? Well, number 1 is natural movement. So it's rare for people in blue zones to sort of intentionally exercise, but they're often kind of unconsciously doing a lot of physical activity throughout the day. They're walking a lot, they're gardening, they are going up hills, this kind of thing. In many places, they don't have a lot of mechanical conveniences, so they're doing a lot of manual labor by hand. And so we see examples of this, for example, in Okinawa, Japan, where people garden for 1 or 2 hours every single day. It's this sort of reasonably gentle physical activity that they can sustain for a long time. Also in Okinawa, they don't have a lot of furniture in their homes, which means they often have to get down onto the ground and then up off it again. And this is actually like doing many squats every day, so they're strengthening their lower body and then preventing falls and sort of hip fractures that can result from that you tend to see quite a lot in older people. The Sardinian Blue Zone, people there live in these villages on steep hillsides. So even just to do a simple walk, you have to walk up or down quite a steep gradient so that they're working that way. And then we see, for example, the Adventists of Loma Linda, California. These people have made sort of exercise a fun, social part of their community. They all get together and do kind of gentle, fun sports. And many of the Nicoyans from Costa Rica, well, they do a lot of their cooking and cleaning from scratch. So they're literally grinding up their own corn into flour themselves. They're using machetes to hack away at grass in their gardens. So they're doing a lot of manual work all through the day without really thinking too much about it. The second core pillar of health that's common across the Blue Zones is a sort of outlook on their life. What do I mean here? Well, the people have stresses, but they tend to manage them quite well and they take time to relax and unwind. Also, often people are kind of actively involved in a faith-based community. So for instance, the Nicoyans, they tend to work pretty hard in the morning. They work for a good few hours, but then they'll often kind of take the afternoons off. They'll spend time with their families or have a nap. The Adventists are highly religious, but this means that they get together very often and engage in sort of faith-based activities and enforce community and social interaction that way. And those people living in Ikaria, this is a Blue Zone on a Greek island, well, they often have these sort of big family meals and parties where they'll socialize, they'll laugh together, they'll dance the night away together. And so they're actually doing quite a lot of physical activity, but also enjoying bonding together without even really trying that hard. Another part of this outlook is a sense of purpose and meaning to their lives. It's quite common in the Blue Zone for people to have something that really gets them out of bed in the morning that they consider as a core value. In Okinawa, they call this ikigai. It's a sort of purpose, a reason for being. What's quite interesting in Okinawa is that they don't have a word for retirement. They don't really retire in the sense that you and I might think of it. They will continue to work pretty much their whole lives. They might only do a couple of hours, but they work on something that's meaningful to them. The Nicoyans in Costa Rica have this term plan de vida. This is a very similar concept to ikigai. It's a value and a purpose for them to embody each day in their lives. And the Adventists in Loma Linda, well, they spend a lot of time volunteering. That's something that brings great meaning to them. And actually the act of volunteering, it's obviously, usually it's quite physical, you're doing something with your body, but also that act of serving and giving to others seems to actually really benefit our life expectancy. The third aspect of health in the Blue Zones is to eat wisely. A really critical finding across pretty much all the Blue Zones is that they eat whole plant foods pretty much entirely. Lots of beans, lots of whole grains, fruit, vegetables, and nuts. And we see that these minimally processed, highly nutritious plant foods dominate their diet. For instance, back around 1950, when we looked at the Okinawan diet, you can see that a staggering 67% of their calories were coming from purple sweet potatoes. That's like 2/3 of what they're eating is purple sweet potatoes. That's incredible. And only about 1 or 2% of their calories were coming from animal-based foods like meat, fish, eggs, and dairy. When we look at the Nicoyans, well, they were eating the so-called Three Sisters, this Mesoamerican diet of corn, beans and squash. They ate a lot of this. What's incredible is they get all the protein and all the nutrition that they need from these three plants, but they don't get the cholesterol and saturated fat that you'd see in animal foods. The Adventists, well, they're about 35% of them are vegan or vegetarian. And those Adventists who are plant-based, compared to the ones that aren't, well, they live the longest and they weigh about 20 pounds less on average. But what's critical to realise here is that whilst it is true that the people in the blue zones are eating sort of little to no animal products, it's also about what they are eating, which is really nutritious, delicious for them, plant foods. But beyond what they're eating, it's also about how they eat. It's very common for people in the blue zones to have eating as a kind of big social thing. They eat with families, they eat at the dinner table. There's a lot of gratitude involved. They really consider their meal. They're not eating mindlessly. They're talking and laughing whilst they're eating. And the Okinawans have this little saying that they do before a meal, reminding them to stop when they're 80% full. The series also suggests that drinking natural wine, like the Icarians do, could be really good for health. I'm a little bit skeptical of that, but okay, we'll see a little bit of natural, unprocessed wine. But what is really clear here is that people are enjoying their foods, right? So they're not like white-knuckling their way through a really restrictive diet that they hate being on, like many of us in the West do when we're trying to lose weight. They're just eating a traditional, simple diet, but one that's really nutritious and is nourishing them. The fourth and final pillar of Blue Zone health, and this is the one that Bretner says is the most important of all, is connection. It's very common in blue zones for people to put a great emphasis on family, community, social interaction, laughing together. And people often put family first, so they will keep their elderly parents with them and care for them. And this is quite interesting because in a place like Sardinia, nursing homes are pretty much non-existent, which is quite telling because on average, when someone goes into a nursing home, they're likely to lose about 2 to 6 years of life expectancy immediately, just by being in there. People also invest heavily in their romantic partners, their husbands and wives, and their relationships and their children. Also friendship, a sort of close circle of friends is quite a common theme. In Okinawa, we see this concept of a moai, a close circle of friends, normally women, and they'll see each other on a daily basis. So they have this constant social interaction with others. We also see that faith of some kind is a very common theme and a community built around that. And what's interesting there is that kind of faith-based community, when you see others around you that also have healthy habits, it helps to reinforce them in you, right? And many of the inhabitants of the blue zones that are featured in the series talk about how important it is to be happy, to laugh with friends, to spend time with family. And indeed, Umeto, our 101-year-old Okinawan lady, she said something I think that sums this up quite well. She said, always have fun, don't get angry, make everyone happy. So those are the 4 key principles of health and longevity in the blue zones. Natural movement, outlook, eating wisely, and connection. But what are the big takeaways then for us to use these principles to improve our lives? And I think that quote from Umeto really gives quite a critical insight here. The people in the blue zones, they're not really struggling to be healthy. They're not striving towards it. They're just kind of living their lives, enjoying it, taking it easy. And because they're living in this environment where habits and traditions are geared towards health, they're seeing this fantastic longevity and great vitality. And that's part of what makes this series, in my opinion at least, very powerful and very inspiring. I'm finding myself really questioning aspects of my life and wanting to emulate the way of life of some of these blue zones. I actually would say this is definitely one of, if not the best health-focused documentary I've ever seen. It's really optimistic and uplifting, and it shows this path towards a a happy, nice sort of health. And so I would strongly suggest you watch this for yourself. But what were the big insights that I gleaned here for applying these principles to get great health? So one of the quite sad things that the series shows us is that the blue zones aren't here to stay necessarily. They are shrinking and sometimes disappearing because modern life, ultra-processed foods, a different way of doing things, they're all coming in and sort of eroding traditional ways of life. So much so that somewhere like Okinawa is actually now the most obese part of Japan, which is pretty heartbreaking. And so this says to me that blue zones are quite fragile. We must kind of nurture and protect them. And that's what Dan Buettner has done. He's taken these insights and tried to build new blue zones at a sort of city level and then even bigger where he can. And I'm happy to say he's seen great success with it. For example, in Albert Lea in Minnesota, he sort of piloted it with this city and added an average of about 3 years onto people's life expectancy, which is phenomenal. And so Buettner suggests that the best way to learn from the blue zones and to implement their lessons is to create policy changes that will sort of subtly change our environment and incentivize healthier choices and disincentivize those choices that we often kind of make unconsciously that make us sicker and shorten our lifespans. And I have to say, I agree with Buettner. It does seem like policy changes and sort of environmental nudges are the best way of enacting health change. But who knows if or when this will actually happen in your neighborhood or mine, right? So I kind of think we can't wait around for this stuff to happen and to hope that a government or someone else is going to solve this problem for us. I think for the time being at least, we have to take responsibility for this ourselves in our own personal life and bring the change that we want to see in the world into our own lives and embody that change. And so there are a few kind of key steps that I can see myself taking and perhaps you'd like to take as well. Firstly, we'd want to go out and find a community to be part of. Something perhaps around a sport you enjoy, a hobby or an activity, or even your faith. And I feel this is perhaps something I've neglected in my own life. I've moved from one city to another for quite a few years and not really experienced a strong sense of community. And that's something that I'd like to change. I'd like to get involved in some more groups of people that are bonded together around a certain activity or hobby or interest. Secondly, you can change your diet. There's literally nothing stopping you. This whole channel is focused on making vegan and plant-based, healthy, nourishing foods really accessible and simple and giving you these health benefits. So watch my other videos and you will hopefully get some of these health benefits. Thirdly, we want to be trying to do more gentle, low-intensity activity. Not necessarily going for marathon sessions at the gym, but just doing little things, walking, gardening, moving around, taking the stairs, that kind of thing. And actually, I've never really gardened, I've got to say, but this series is kind of inspiring me to give it a go. So look, if you have any resources that I should look into of a sort of gardening for dummies, I would really appreciate that. Feel free to leave a comment below and point me in the right direction because I'd like to start maybe growing one or two things that I could eat. So fourthly, I think we can work to find our own ikigai or plan de vida. So this could be part of your work, but I think for many of us, our work doesn't really give us a clear sense of purpose or meaning in our lives. So it may be something we have to do outside of work. This could be volunteering, engaging with your community, taking part in things you're passionate about and talking about them. It could be giving to others and serving people however you can and solving problems that are within your power to solve. One of the things the series does talk about is that people in the blue zones manage stress because a lot of their problems are things that they can actually solve and have an impact on. Whereas for many of us, we're bombarded with all the world's problems through our smartphones and social media and the news cycle. And these are really big, overwhelming problems that we can't actually do a lot about in our own lives very easily. But there are great things you can do. you can create foods for people, you can build things, you can fix things. These are totally within your power and will give you a lot of satisfaction whilst also helping others. So those were the really key takeaways that I got from this series, but you should definitely go and watch it yourself. This is a game changer of a series, I really think that. Now, if you are wanting to eat more whole plant foods while still really enjoying your meals, I have a free gift for you, my friend. I want to say thank you for being here with me today. So I want to give you my guide on how to make vegan meals that are delicious really quickly and easily. You're going to get my top 5 time-saving hacks that will give you hours of your time back in the kitchen. So if that sounds like it will be helpful to you, please click on the link in the description below and it is all yours. I'd like to thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.